Since antiquity, humans have wondered how to explain natural phenomena, but also try to answer the deep question, why is there anything at all? Until recently, all those questions were raised by the same people. From Aristotle to Leibniz, there was no clear distinction between those different questions. Everything belonged to philosophy. Nonetheless, science and philosophy are nowadays clearly separated and do not answer the same questions. But where does this distinction in the nature of those questions lie? In one word, where does science end and where does philosophy begin? To answer this question, I and Hugo will recreate a debate we had. I argue that there is a fundamental difference between science and philosophy, and Hugo that every philosophical question is doomed to be answered by science in the future. In order to explain the distinction between science and philosophy, I will start from the ultimate metaphysical question: why is there something? Following the German philosopher Heidegger, I will shed light on the fundamental difference between the something and the there is, which Heidegger calls the ontological difference. The difference between what there is, the something, and the being of what there is, the there is. In one word, the difference between beings and being. Let's take an example. The book I'm holding is not the same thing as the fact there is a book. It is the there is that leads to metaphysical questions. Where does it come from? Why is it there? Does God exist and explain the being of the book? Those questions on being belong to philosophy and theology. It is different from the questions on the something itself. What is its chemical composition? Why? What are its physical properties? How does it interact with other beings? Those questions on beings belong to science. I will introduce two new words to refer more clearly to the distinction between beings and being. I will use the term ontic to refer to what concerns beings, and the term ontotheology to refer to what concerns being.
I do not think that science is limited to the question of the ontic sphere. Take, for example, the question, what is the meaning of human existence? This question belongs to the ontotheological sphere, since theologians, as well as philosophers, try to answer it. For a long time, this question remained outside the field of science, and for a good reason. Science had nothing to say. But this has begun to change. Scientists like Hawking are providing scientific answers. Take, for example, his book, Brief Answers to Big Questions. While his claim that philosophy is dead is highly questionable, Hawking does defend a scientific answer in a scientific way to the existence of humanity. We are here by chance, and there is no need to invoke supernatural entities, or the existence of a sacred mission of humanity. He is not the only one to bring this kind of answer. Other scientists, like Sean B. Carroll, bring a biological one. The emergence of humanity is due to the chance of evolution. She concludes her book, a series of fortunate events, with the sentence, we are not special, we are lucky. We didn't exist for 14.5 billion years. Then we got 80 or 90 years if we are lucky. And then we'll never exist again, so we should make the most of it. So, science shows that the question of the meaning of our existence is wrong, since we are here by chance. I think that since the answer is depleasing, it is not considered a valid answer to the question. But I disagree. Showing that the question is wrong is an answer in itself.
Be careful of not making science say what it doesn't say. On the question of why are we here, science does not exactly say we are here by chance. It says that the conditions that make life possible are very specific, and that it is by chance that there is life on Earth. Science says that the randomness of genetic mutations and natural selection made the humans we are. Thus, it answers questions within the ontic sphere. It never questions the being itself of the beings. Reporting that our presence on Earth is due to the randomness of causal chains is not enough to deduce that the fact itself, there are beings, is due to randomness. This deduction is possible only by belief, not by the scientific method. Therefore, I still argue that science can only answer questions within the ontic sphere, and it is not able to tackle issues of the ontotheological sphere.
Another argument that some may make in favor of science is the following. Science can produce a discourse on God. Indeed, suppose someone chooses the following convoluted definition. God is a universal thing about which science cannot produce an answer, in order to win the argument. Then one will answer him, if there is something transcendent, with which no interaction is possible, one cannot do theology or philosophy about it either. Any subject of a discourse in one of these two fields is at least in the human understanding. It therefore has a real existence, since it is at least present in the form of thoughts in someone's head. It is not totally disconnected from our world. Thus, it has been shown that any subject that a human can talk about has an anchor in the tangible world. At that point, science can produce a discourse on it, although it is significantly different from other discourses. I have presented here an argument that science can talk about anything. And it can, but here again, there is this distinction to be made. The discourse produced by science is about ontic subjects. Sociology will, for example, explain the origin of this question and justify the answers that different groups give to it. Neurology will give information on how the concepts we use to answer these questions materialize in our brain. At no time will the scientific discourse be able to deal with the veracity of such statements, if veracity exists. Another example, anthropology can produce a scientific discourse on morality. It characterizes the different types of morality that exist in the world, explains the different conceptions of the world that are at the origin of these different conceptions of morality. However, it cannot show that there is no morality with a capital M, sort of absolute, transcendent, and universal morality. At most, anthropology can show that if such a thing exists, it is not recognized by all. In the same way that it is obvious that if a God exists, he is not recognized by all, and maybe even by nobody.
We have now explored the limits of the domain of expertise of science, defining the limits of the ontic sphere. And yet the ability of science to provide trustworthy results within this sphere remains unknown. Nowadays, science is usually viewed as an efficient machine, which provides reliable knowledge on the universe and its operation, and this knowledge is usually delivered to the public as facts. But what enables these people who don't even practice science to resolutely believe in it? What justifies this belief and its results and distinguishes it from religious belief or pseudoscience? Many philosophers have tried to break down the core of science, to unfold its rules and understand how scientific knowledge is constructed. And yet, as M.Lalaux said in his article named As Critics Run Out of Steam, one after the other, we witnessed that the black boxes of science remained closed, and that it was rather the tools that lay the dust of our workshop, disjointed and broken. End of quote. Still, looking at the broken pieces of these tools, we might be able to gain, if not an answer, at least an intuition of what the answer to all these questions about science might be. A first idea would be to say that the reliability of scientific theories lies in their ability to make predictions. Note here that it is crucial to make the difference between the concept of prediction and of an explanation. A scientific prediction is the prediction of a qualitative or quantitative result of an experiment that has not been performed yet. This definition of predictions includes the possibility of an experimental result that contradicts the theory and invalidates it. On the contrary, an explanation is breaking down a known phenomenon in the terms of the theory. An explanation is always performed a posteriori on the results of experiments that have already been performed. And there lies the first boundary between science and pseudoscience, as it was studied by Karl Popper. The latter is able to make explanation of the world, but suffers from what Popper called unfalsifiability. What makes scientific theories reliable is their falsifiability, their gamble on the results of an experiment. It is because a theory resisted multiple experimental tests that we tend to believe in it and to believe its results. Now that we have spotted that experimental tests are the key to scientific reliability, we can investigate further how this verification is performed. Some philosophers have criticized the belief in a purely objective analysis of scientific data. M.Lalaux argued that scientists were building social networks of approval, so that in the end, scientific theories were not experimentally confirmed, but socially confirmed. The most famous example of this social confirmation is that of Eddington's eclipse experiment. It showed that, even though half of the data was apparently not supporting Einstein's theory, the notoriety and the advertising of Eddington made the British scientific community accept the interpretation of the outcome of the experiment. Yet this social confirmation faces several oppositions. The first one is the plurality of ambitions within the scientific community. In the case of Eddington's experiment, the American scientific community showed way less enthusiasm than the British one towards Eddington's interpretation of the results, and so they started multiple expeditions to clarify the implication of this experiment. Moreover, the multiplicity of experimental tests over time performed by multiplicity of scientists eventually overrides the social aspect in the verification of a theory. What remains in the end is an empirically confirmed theory whose validity is no longer dependent on the will of a person or a group of people. So, what have we learned through this philosophical journey? Science cannot answer all questions. What lies in the ontotheological sphere is unreachable to science, and that is where philosophy begins. But still, science remains able to provide trustworthy results. Trusting science is not blindly accepting facts only supported by authority or notoriety. Trusting science is trusting millions of people with different intuitions, hopes, and beliefs.